is when people can sort of choose the room they're going to. I'm always like the scary room that no one wants to come to. So thanks for being in the scary room today, because this can be a little bit an intimidating topic for people. And hopefully we'll sort of destigmatize this a little bit for those of you who might feel a bit that way today, and to start to talk about how you can really sort of reframe your relationship to sales so that you can experience sales success earlier rather than later, not only in your business today, but in your career, over your life, essentially. So a little bit, sort of like, thank you, Angie, for the that was the, the sort of highlight reel. What that all really means to me is that I get to help entrepreneurs like yourselves, and social impact companies particularly, to have the impact that you're looking to have in the world and to have the success that you're looking to have, because without sales, it's not possible. It's just as simple as that. And my business and my journey as an entrepreneur has allowed me to do some really incredible things. So for those of you who are just starting out on your entrepreneurial journey, I think it's the most amazing thing you can do for yourself to build, truly the life that you want and the impact that you want in the world. So, I live in Whistler full time because of my job. I'm able to travel the world, or I was a year ago, to teach people how to sell. I'm able to be flexible and spend time with my family. So all the things that, sort of we think about, that entrepreneurship can really give you, I'm here to tell you after 20 years, absolutely that's true. And it's an amazing journey that you can go on and you've chosen to start out on. So congratulations to all of you for that choice, because life will never be the same. I can tell you that much. So once you start on this track, you kind of never really get off it. So that is a little bit about me. The other, one other thing that I did want to mention that wasn't in the bio, in terms of sort of why you might want to listen to anything I have to say about sales, is that, so not only have I been selling for 20 odd years, in my own company, but I've worked with, thousands of clients at this point, multiple millions of dollars, of products and services sold because of that work. I was also asked to teach sales and sales management at UBC, at Sutter School of Business. And the reason why I bring that up was because actually that was one of the most fulfilling things that I ever got to do, because I got people early. And what I mean by that is, if we can start to have a good relationship with sales earlier in our lives, it actually impacts the rest of our careers and the rest of our success trajectory. And so, I'm always so happy to work with younger people, particularly because we can sort of save the younger people from having some of these negative experiences that often a lot of us have when we go out and we try to sell, especially if we're trying to do it in the older sort of paradigm, which I'll sort of bust that open in a minute. So want to start with this quote. I'm not actually a huge fan of this guy, but I do think he's right about this. And so Gary Vaynerchuk says, money is oxygen. You can produce the greatest service or thing, and if you don't know how to sell it, you are out of business. And I think that's absolutely true. If you're not capable of selling, there's really nothing else that matters. So this is true. And it's often a really scary thing for people to face, because they actually don't really love the idea of selling. So other people are super excited to do it. So I want to sort of get a gauge of, sort of who's in the room and that sort of thing. So if you can just put in the chat, what one word would describe your relationship to sales right now? And then Angie, if you could just read out a couple of them, because I feel like I maybe can't see the chat. I don't know, unless I can't figure out how to do that. But
yeah, it's hard when you're in full screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to: passionate, nervous, legendary. Oh, hey, nice.
Legendary, nice.
Do or die, aspirational, married, passion, conflicted, necessary but enjoyable.
Okay, great.
In it, love. Someone speaks your language there. Complicated, reluctant, love the challenge. Hey, you guys are going.
Great.
Empathy, lots of love. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, there you go.
Excellent. So it actually seems like, and not a surprise given this group, that we're in a group that's more heavily on the side of actually really liking sales, which is super fantastic. But for those of you who, wrote like reluctant or hesitant or those sorts of things, please know that that's totally normal. And that you're absolutely not alone in that. In fact, in most rooms that are not MVBC rooms, you'd have a much higher percentage of people who are like, oh, no, I want nothing to do with sales. So totally normal, if you're not on the sort of I love sales bandwagon. So the issue that we tend to come across with sales is that this happens to us. So you've likely been told most of your life that entrepreneurship is the ticket, right? I just said it too. It's the ticket to all of the financial, wealth that you might want to create for yourself. It's the ticket to impact that you might want, freedom that all of these things, spending time with your family, all of those things that we want to be able to create for ourselves with our business. That is all true. But then the other side of it is that the first thing that we're asked to do when we start a business is figure out how to sell something. And that's often a surprise to people. It's funny, having been in business now for 20 years, it doesn't seem to me like it should be a surprise, but absolutely it is for some people, that you are now a salesperson. Maybe you weren't before, maybe you have lots of experience, but if you weren't before, now you are, every single one of you. And in fact, life is a series of sales situations. So really, we're all doing sales all the time, but particularly in an entrepreneurial capacity, you are now a salesperson. So when I call you a salesperson, I want you to tap into how that feels for you. Does it make you excited when I put that label on you? Does it make you feel something else when I put that label on you? Does it make you nervous? Does it make you worry? So there's different reactions that people can have when we put that label of sales on a person. And the reason why that happens is because even if you've had great experiences with sales and maybe you like it yourself, we have all been raised in a culture that vilifies sales, right? So we remember what's that movie where the always be closing? I forget what it's called, but that movie. Any sort of stereotype that you might have around used car salesmen, that sort of thing. So I just basically said you were a salesperson, and also you have those stereotypes in your head about being a salesperson. What that creates in most people, and a lot of people, is resistance, right? I don't want to be a used car salesman. I don't want to be pushy or sleazy or aggressive or all of those things that I've seen represented, particularly in the media around sales as I've been growing up. But the other thing that really sort of solidifies that concern in a lot of people, and that I call it sales baggage, because I think we all carry it around in one way or another, is that you've probably experienced it, right? So think back to when you've experienced a sales experience that has been negative. How did it make you feel to receive that as a buyer? And please, again, if you can just put some like single words in the chat for that, that would be awesome. So when you've had like a pushy or aggressive or like all those negative stereotypes, I'm sure you've all experienced them. When you've experienced them, how has it felt to receive that?
Sounds like the movie was Glengarry Glen Ross.
That's the one. Thank you, whoever said that.
That was Ryan. Thanks, Ryan. So I've got off-putting, angry, conflict, stress, used, abrasive, go away, annoyed, frustrated, stressful, hurting, defeating.
So those are all really awful, negative things, right? None of those things are positive. And so as a human being, please, raise your hand if you're super down with making people feel that way, right? None of us are leaping to be like, yes, let me make someone feel manipulated and used and all of these things. So there's different levels of what we carry around with this, but I actually believe that every single person who's, sort of been raised in the last 30 years or so carries some version of this. So be gentle with yourself as you're selling, because you're actually needing to overcome a lot of this sort of internalized baggage around sales in order to be successful. So the other thing that I just want to get out of the way now is what I call the myth of the natural. So often what happens during my talks is people, they'll sort of come up to me after and they'll be like, great, Shannon, that was really great. You had some great insights. There was some good information, but I just want to let you know that I'm not a natural salesperson, so this doesn't apply to me. And I just want to take that completely off the table today, because I actually think that that doesn't matter. Maybe there are some naturals in the world, but you absolutely do not need to be a natural salesperson in order to sell something effectively. So even if you feel like this isn't the thing that you were born to do, and I know there are a few of you in the crowd that actually feel that way, which is great too. But even if you don't feel that way, you can still be successful. You can still be successful in a way that feels good and authentic and right to you. And that's what we'll be going into how to do today. So easy for me to stand up here, sit up here and say that, right? I've, sold all sorts of, millions of dollars of services. Like I said before, I taught this stuff at university. So obviously I'm a natural, obviously. Nope. Surprise. Guess who else loathed sales for literally over a decade? Me. I hated selling. If I was really honest with myself, for the first 10 years of my business, I dragged myself through sales activities because I thought that was what sort of I had to do. And I was doing it the way that I thought I had to do it. To the extent that when I went into like a sales situation, so I'll give you an example. So when I first started my company, it was a marketing agency, and we sold into mining, the mining industry. And so I would be going into, pitch big projects like a website or like financial reports, that sort of thing, like an annual report. And I would have to go into the bathroom. And I remember what the bathrooms looked like, because it was in the beautiful Bentall, like the Bentall 5 kind of buildings. And I would go into these beautiful fancy bathrooms, and I'd have to go into the stall and like talk myself into what I was about to do, essentially. And I put on something that I call Sales Shannon, which is what I thought everyone needed to see and hear and, experience from me in order to buy from me. And then I'd go in and I would do my thing. I had a business partner at the time. Her name was Diana. And I would say we would do the Shannon and Diana show, right? We'd go in, we'd do the Shannon and Diana show. We'd convert the business. And by the way, we converted like mad, 80% conversion rate for almost 10 years. That's right. So I was doing it well, but the issue was that I didn't feel good about it. There was something in me that felt like I was doing something bad to somebody else when I was selling. And it had nothing to do with the service. Like, how you hear that thing, you have to believe in what you sell. And as long as you believe in what you sell, then all will be okay. Well, I call BS on that, because I absolutely believed in what I sold, and I still had a problem with it. It was still really hard for me, and I still felt really bad about it. Like I was doing something bad, and I didn't know why. And so what was interesting that happened was that eventually, after about 10 years of doing this, my business partner unexpectedly left the business, and I had to go in and sell something else to keep the business going. And so the next thing I went in to sell was just me. So I had to just show up as myself and not the Shannon and Diana show. And what happened was that I had to actually face this issue that I had with sales. And it turns out that there was something there that was actually keeping me from really sort of showing up when I didn't have that safety net of her being around. And I lost that sale. And it was one of the few sales that I had lost in a very, very long time. And it didn't feel very good. And then I lost another one and another one and another one. And what happened was eventually I just stopped selling, because I thought, what is happening here? Right? I know how to do this, but it's just not flowing. It's not coming out the way it's supposed to. Nothing's happening the way it's supposed to. And in that moment of stopping, I had to face the fact that I actually did believe that I was doing something negative to somebody else. I didn't know why, but I knew that I felt that way. And, after looking at it later, I realized all of that cultural context that I said, and I realized that it was natural. But the other thing that I want to really stipulate to all of you right now is I realized one other big thing, which has carried me through these last 20 years. As an entrepreneur, you get to dictate and create your reality in a way that most normal humans do not get to do. And in that moment, I embraced that and thought, you know what? I can make sales into whatever I want it to be. This is my company. I'll do it exactly the way that I want to, and I will frame it and think about it in exactly the way that works for me. And so that's when I came up with this. What if sales could be an act of love? What if sales could be the nicest thing that you ever did for anybody else? And as I thought about it, I thought, actually, you know what? That can be absolutely true. It doesn't have to be manipulative. It doesn't have to be convincing or conniving someone into doing something. Really, at its core, what I was trying to do when I was selling something to someone is get them to move towards something better than they had today, and to consider my approach and my direction to do that. And so really, if I looked at it, that was the most loving thing that I could do for another person, is come to the table with a solution and be clear about what that is and give them a path toward it if they chose to take it. So if you don't take anything else that I say from this talk today, other than this is the thing. Remember that when you're selling, if you're selling the right thing to the right person, you are doing something incredibly kind. And I think sales is actually one of the most noble professions that there is, if you're doing it with integrity and with authenticity. So that's a lovely vision. How do we actually do it? It's really the next thing that comes up, right? People say, great, Shannon, that's wonderful. Sales is an act of love. Now I have to go do it. Please tell me how to actually approach it so that it doesn't seem so hard. And the reason why sales is so hard is partially because of all of that baggage that I talked about. But another piece of it is it's as hard or as easy as you make it. And what I mean by that is it's how we approach it that really, equates to our results. Because what happens is this: we have beliefs and thoughts about something, then we have feelings that result from that, and our feelings dictate our actions. And when you're selling, you have to be in action, right? You're taking actions with another human being. Our actions dictate our results, and it goes around and around and around. And what can end up happening is what I call the sales spiral of doom. And this is what I'm going to try to help you all avoid today. The sales spiral of doom is basically when you have that little nugget of belief that I talked about, whether it's little or big, and there's varying sizes in this room, of that sales is bad and I really shouldn't do it. If you have that nugget and then you go and you think, you know what? I've started this company. I'm going to do everything to make it successful. I'm going to go sell the crap out of this thing. And you go and you do it and you bring all of your energy and you're very excited and you have that meeting, and then it doesn't go well. And you feel like you are a failure in that particular context. So then you go back here, right? So you're like, great. So selling is bad. I didn't feel great about it. That affected my actions. I got really bad results. Well, what happens from there is that it just reinforces over and over and over, and it gets stronger and stronger and stronger until you do the thing that I did. And honestly, this is what will happen. If you can't figure out how to feel good about selling, you'll stop, because there's only so long that we can power through something that makes us feel really bad and makes us feel like we're doing bad things to other people. So I want you to be able to avoid the sales spiral of doom. And there are very simple things that you can do outside of just thinking that sales is an act of love, because it's a little more complicated than that, in order to feel good about how you're selling and then get that success, get those good results, so that the spiral becomes an upward spiral rather than a downward spiral. So that's what we're looking to do today. Before I jump into the three, any questions, comments about sort of the mindset around this before we continue?
I'll give it a few seconds for people to type. People seem to agree with the spiral of doom, though. It's a good visualization.
I know it because I've been in it, unfortunately. You can get out, but why enter it in the first place? Let's just avoid it. Mm-hmm. Totally. Okay, great. Well, if everyone's clear, then we'll keep moving. So what I want to do today is share with you three elements, essentially, of sales success. And I like to think of them like three like stool legs. So if you don't have all of these legs present in a sales situation, you're unlikely to be successful. Now, that's not saying that you won't be successful. Of course, there will be some times where you'll luck into a sale, and that can absolutely happen. But in order to get to an empowered yes from a prospect, all three of these things need to be present. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping an eye on all of them as we move our prospects through the sales process. So the first is clarity, the second is connection, and the third is choice. So clarity, and what I mean by clarity is from sort of both sides. We want to make sure that we are incredibly clear about what we are looking for from the sales process. And we also want to be very clear about what we're trying to do for the other person. So that clarity really needs to be there, not only from what they want, but from what we want. And it's like, I was meeting with an HR professional the other day, and she said to me, people have to remember that when when you're interviewing them, they're interviewing you as much as possible. And it's the same thing in a sale, right? It's not just you convincing someone that you're the best choice and why they should go for you and like having a great list of, features and benefits. It's about you determining whether you want them as a client as much as it is about them determining whether they want you as a vendor. So remember that, because there's incredible power in that. This is another definition of sales that I like to give because it's a great thing to sort of keep in mind as you're starting out on a sales journey with anyone. And that is really that you're both working toward the same thing. It doesn't have to be an antagonistic relationship, and really it shouldn't be. It should be a partnership, and the partnership should be working toward a shared vision of a better future. Your job as a salesperson is to help that prospect to see the world the way that you do, and to want to move in the direction that you can help them move into that, better future in whatever capacity that is. Now, the key here is that you can't tell them what that is. And often we try to tell people, right? If you buy my thing, your life will be better because X, Y, Z. Nobody wants to be told what to do. So the much more engaging, appealing, and highly converting approach is to get them to paint that picture for themselves. And the way that we do that is by asking great questions. So asking great questions, diving into what they really need, not trying to force, ourselves into something, but making sure that there is alignment between what they need and what we have before we move into the pitch. So really making sure that we're keeping an eye on that biggest picture, which is that we are all working toward the same thing, the prospect and us. The other piece about clarity is around what I call client selection. Who you serve matters, and how you start this company will dictate the direction of it forever, right? So if you can start to get the right clients in the door from day one, your life is going to be much easier. You're going to be much more successful, and you're going to be much happier. I'll tell you that much. If you're serving the people who actually fit with who you are and who your business is. So I like to use this definition of an ideal client that's a little different than what you might have been introduced to date. And that is that an ideal client is the person who has the highest potential for transformation with what you do or sell. So if you think to yourself, is this person for me? Well, do they have a high potential for transformation with what you do or sell? So we often talk about the people with the deepest pain, right? And I could talk a lot about how there's sales terminology that, it gets such a bad rap, and I'm trying to reclaim a lot of it. So when we talk about someone having deep pain, the flip side of that is this potential for transformation. So often it's easier to think about it that way, right? So we need the people who are starting here and have the furthest place to go when they experience our product or service. If they are starting here, then it's not as much of a gap, right? So we want that gap to be as big as possible, because that's the value. The value is within the gap, where we can get them from A to B. So the interesting thing about client selection is often the beginning of a business, people will tell me, well, that's really nice, Shannon, but I have to pay the bills, right? Anybody ever had that thought? I would love to be very selective about everyone I work with, but I have a mortgage to pay. Thank you very much. So here's the thing about that. Being selective is very difficult. It's very difficult to do in terms of being clear enough on your marketing, your messaging, that you're only really attracting those specific people. But more importantly, making that decision to say no to the wrong people is really, really difficult. But I'm going to give you the reason why I think you should. If you choose the wrong people and you let the wrong people into your company, you let the wrong people buy your stuff, what's going to happen is at the end of their experience with that, with your product or service, they're going to turn around and talk about you. It's what we naturally do as humans. And still to this day, despite all of the technology, businesses essentially are built on testimonials and referrals. So what are they saying about you, right? That's what we've always got to be interested in understanding. And the problem is that if you let a client in whose potential for transformation is only a little bit, no matter how great your thing is, no matter how amazingly well you serve them, they only have that amount of chance to come out the other side, right? So if I'm an ideal client and I'm a 3 out of 5, so let's say, Angie's a prospect. She comes in, I'm really excited. She looks like she has money. I'm like, great, she's going to spend it. I'm so excited. But she only can actually experience my services at a 3 out of 10 because of the scenario that she's in, maybe where she is in her business, whatever it is. I serve her 1,000%, right? I give her everything I have. She does her part. Everybody does what they're supposed to do. At the end of that experience, what level is she capable of rating me at? Probably not much more than a 3, unless she's just making stuff up, right? Because she's only able to experience the product or service at that level. Therefore, that's all she can talk about it at. Well, what do you think happens if we create essentially an army of people who are talking about us at a 3 out of 10? We don't get new business. And this is actually a super huge business killer, is when we allow the wrong people in. So you've got to think, all the steps back. If you want people to talk about you at a 10 out of 10, choose the clients who have a 10 out of 10 potential. And if you're not, you're risking your business. And therefore you're actually stealing from your future self, is the way that I like to, that's my tough love version of it. Don't steal from your future self. Only choose the people who are really, really well suited to you, and you will experience a lot more success over the long term. Now, you all have, I would assume, rather small businesses. So there are other reasons to be very selective about who you're trying to attract and to not be trying to spread yourself too thin. So when we really are very well defined in exactly who is right for us, who our people are, so you've really defined your target market well. And I don't just mean this from a demographic perspective, like 35 to 55, live in the lower mainland, blah, 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 all those things, great. But what about the deeper part of it? What about the psychographics? What about the values alignment? Who do they need to be to experience that great transformation that you have to offer? Because not everyone can, not possible. So when you've defined that super well, what happens is that you only market and you only sell to those types of people. Well, what happens with that is that you have an amazing amount of efficiency. And efficiency, as I'm sure you're already aware, is the name of the game right now. You can't afford to waste marketing dollars on people who aren't aligned with you. You can't afford to waste sales time trying to chase people down who really don't want what you have, because they can't. They're not predisposed to wanting it. So my recommendation to all of you is do that work and do it deeply. Understand who is right for you, and even more importantly, who is not right for you, and then be brave enough to go out and only try to get those people, because it takes an incredible amount of courage to be that selective. But if you are, that is the shortest path to success in all sorts of ways. The other element that naturally sort of falls out of this is if you have a really well-defined target market and you're really serving and selling to them only, you're able to give them better customer service because you automatically know what they need. and you're able to give it to them. So it's like this rinse and repeat. You sort of replicate what works. If you're trying to attract, or you're just letting, I prefer to think of it as letting people in. If you let the wrong people in and you have a bunch of different types of people who need a bunch of different types of things from you, you actually don't really know how to give them all great customer service, because you're always learning what's new, what's needed now. Whereas if you just choose that market, you know what they need, you give it to them, you rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, that equates to great customer service. And the third piece is decreased marketing costs. You know, it's all good when you're Google and huge companies to be looking toward broad markets. And this is the thing that I actually get a lot of pushback on this in this particular room, right? That I'm, you know, we're going to take over the world. And I'm all for that. Just please do it one step at a time. So you absolutely can take on multiple market segments. You can take on everything that you want. But the obstacle that I see get in the way of a lot of companies' success is that they try to do too much at once. So choose a market, really get to know it, really understand it, sell, you know, till the cows come home in that market. Then once that's done, move to another one step at a time. That's the way. So I already talked a little bit about this, but what this is referring to is when you've done a really good job of that ideal client profiling and that market segmentation, you should actually be able to basically draw a face of a person who is your ideal client. So it's not that like we serve, you know, men from 15 to 35 or whatever. It's when you describe to me. So one of the things that I do often in my workshops is, and we actually probably have a chance to do it right now. Yeah, maybe we'll do it right now just so you can have the experience of it. Please, all of you, and I'll give you like 2 minutes, write down in 2 sentences, okay? And not really long sentences, like let's not cheat, like regular size sentences, okay? 2 sentences, who you serve and how you serve them. I'll give you 2 minutes. And what you're looking for is that face. When you read this out to me, a face should come up in my head of someone that I know, or someone that at least that I can visualize. If I met them, I could refer them to you. All right. So, Angie, I totally don't mean to put you on the spot because we didn't plan this at all, but would there be any way that we could break people out into groups of 2 and just like get them to read these things out to each other for a couple of minutes?
Oh yeah, sure.
Sorry.
A bunch of people to put them in the chat, but yeah, sure.
Okay, awesome. Because I find that it's actually really great to get feedback from another person. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to break you all out into groups of 2. A is going to read their 2 statements to B, and then vice versa. And what I want the other person to do is please be brutally honest. Okay. Like now's not the nice time to be nice. I mean, do it nicely, but be honest. About, did a face come up for you? Was it clear to you about who that person is really looking for? Or do they need to do some work on getting that focus to be more precise so that they can communicate that clarity better? And if this isn't possible, Andrew, we can totally not do this. I'm sorry, I super just.
Oh, all good.
I flipped the script at the last second, but I'm inspired to have everyone do this.
I think some people aren't quite ready yet, but what I'll do is I'll create a bunch of breakout rooms. You have the option of not accepting. So for those who want to do it, go. And for
There
those
you
who don't, just stay.
But I would highly recommend doing it because these are the safe spaces that we can practice with each other before you're like in a networking room and it's high stakes and, you know, all of those things. So take these opportunities if you can.
All right, so I've got yeah, some rooms have 2 people, some people have 3, some have 3 people, but again.
Okay, there's some have 3. Then let's give it, we'll probably do 1, 2, 3. Let's give it like 5 minutes in total for this then, Angie, and then we'll bring them back. Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Awesome. And if anyone has questions, but just put them in the chat and we'll be looking at the chat and we can help you. Hi, I'm back. Yeah, that was,
you're back.
I did a breakout room too.
Yeah, so yeah, sorry, I couldn't figure out how to take you out.
It was great, actually. It was really nice.
Good. Good.
I missed that piece of it of not being able to walk around and, you know, talk to people. So that was actually really nice to be able to do for a minute. So hopefully that was helpful to everyone. Does anyone have any comments on, you know, how it was to get feedback from someone else? If someone said something surprising to you, if there was a, you know, tip that you got from someone else that you didn't sort of recognize going into that conversation? Did you take anything out that you didn't walk in with? Anyone want to share in that?
Got a couple. That was great. At the moment, I'll let you know if anything else.
Fun and helpful. Oh, I figured out how to see the chat.
Oh, good. Okay.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I love breakout rooms as well, because I think that part of the value of all of these sessions is that you can sort of give each other feedback. So my recommendation for all of you is to find people to do that with as much as possible. And I know it's weird right now because we don't have nearly as many networking opportunities as we used to, but try to find rooms where you can just test this stuff out and see what people say and, you know, get their honest feedback, because that's really the only way to improve all of this. So, so the next stage after really understanding the sort of what is the face, and by the way, with this, when you're doing this, if you can do a good job of this, particularly in networking scenarios, what happens is essentially you create like an unpaid sales force for yourself, right? If you're really clear about what you do and who you do it for, even if I'm not for you, like, you know, I wasn't involved. I think her name was Laura. I'm worse with names, but Laura, I believe I was just in the breakout room with. I don't need her service, but now I understand what she does. And so if we connect on LinkedIn, let's say, and I come up with someone in a couple of weeks that needs her service, who am I going to think of? I'm going to think of her. When we started, though, I didn't see the face. And so I couldn't have done that for her. But once we got into sort of some of the details, I could see the face. And so now I can actually go and be that unpaid sales force for her. So that clarity is so important to do the work on, because that's what happens on the other end is, guess what? You don't have to do a bunch of selling because other people are out there selling for you. And then they are referring into your business, which I don't know about you, but I enjoy unpaid sales labor. So there you go. All right, so let's get on to the next piece. So the next piece of this is, given what you just wrote down and we shared with someone else, the next piece of it is to be courageous enough to really, you know, sink into that and only message and only try to speak to those people and to not worry what anybody else thinks of you. This is particularly hard, I find, in Canadian rooms. We have this thing about how we need everybody to like us all the time and we can't alienate anyone. And so my challenge to you is to go and look at your marketing messaging and look at what you're saying in sales scenarios. Are you being precise in who you are attracting and how you're talking to them? And are you doing that at the potential exclusion of other people? Because what, like with this magnet, right? The one side attracts, what does the other side do? Repels. Are you willing to repel the wrong people? And that's easy for me to sit here and say, but it's really hard to live on a day-to-day basis. But that is the basis of proper client selection. And when you're client selecting precisely, all of that other amazing stuff that I talked about before will happen for you, and life will get a lot easier from a sales perspective. So we have to always be considering, what are they saying about us, right? So what is this person capable of saying about me? And if it's not at a 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, maybe you don't take them on as a client. Maybe try to make your messaging more precise so it's not attracting those people on your website. Really be courageous in how precise the messaging is. So we already did that, so that's great. Okay, so the second piece is connection. This tends to be really the easiest part, I'd say, actually, for a lot of people, is, connecting with another human being. COVID times has made it very strange, though. So when you can't be in a room with someone, I'm sure you've experienced, it's not as easy to make, a connection with them. So things are definitely different than what they've been before. But, technology and Zoom is not what gets in the way of connection. What gets in the way of connection generally are some other things. So a question that I get asked so much is like, so what really makes a great salesperson? And I honestly believe that connection is one of the very, very key things. So how do we do it, and how do we avoid not doing it, I think, is the more important thing. So often what happens with sales is that we start out the sales and we're like, this is what I'd like to be in the sales equation. I'd like to be confident and, looking like I'm elegant and I know what I'm doing, and like all of the things. This woman exudes so much confidence and expertise and all of the things that we all want to exude in a sales scenario. And then and often we do this in life. So this is like who we are most of the time. And then we add the sales label, the sales layer on top of it. And all of a sudden we become some weirdo who can't say anything, sort of right or the way that we want to. We're stumbling over our words. We are not cool. We are not collected. We are nothing that we'd like to be. And it's only because we've put one little word onto the context of what we're doing, and that's sales. And so what I like to say around this is like, why do you think we make it so weird? We always make things so weird when it's around selling. And that's what's so funny about it, because really selling is just service before they're a client. So I'll say one more time, it's just service before they're a client. So however you would serve someone as a client, allow yourself to be that same person before they're a client, because that's actually what they want from you. That's what they need from you. So show up in service. This is a beautiful thing too, because it can release you from a lot of the BS that kind of goes in the back of our head about our expectations around a sales conversation. So the next time you go into a sales conversation, instead of that voice in the back of your head saying, okay, let's go, let's get them, they're going to be my client, here we go. Maybe just say to yourself, I'm going to show up. I'm going to serve this person to the best of my ability, whether or not they want my thing. And I'm going to leave them better than I found them. And I can tell you, if you do that and you let go of all of the sales expectations, you will convert and things will go well. Because that is really the core of sales, is service. What are you doing for this other person? And maybe it's not selling them your thing in the end. Maybe it's connecting them with a babysitter. Maybe it's, putting them onto another company that that can actually serve them better once you figure out that they're not within your ideal target market. And that's okay. Because the beauty of this is that if you serve them well, even if they turn out not to be your client, again, guess what they're doing? They're creating that unpaid sales force, because you left them feeling so well served, and they'll really want to help you. So the other thing that we need to remember is to keep the focus on them. If we want to make it less weird, then don't make it so much about us, right? The way to make it less weird is to make it about them. This whole thing is about them. It's not about you. It's really not even about your product. It's about understanding their needs and seeing if there's an alignment with what you can do to solve those needs. That's literally all it is. Do the puzzle pieces fit or don't they? And it's okay if they don't. So we want to keep the focus on them, understanding them, ask the questions about them, keeping the focus on what they want, not what you want. And if you do that, that will release a lot of the weirdness that we tend to layer on sales conversations. The third tip around connection is what I call the golden rule of sales. Probe, don't prove. And what I mean by that is there's this place and this time that inevitably happens in a lot of sales conversations or scenarios where you'll kind of go into this place of, well, I will tell you why you need this thing. Let me tell you how it is. And the minute that you feel that proving energy, like I'm going to prove to you why we are the ones for you, that is a red flag in sales, my friends. Check yourself at that moment, back up, back off a little bit. And the way that you can get back on course is ask a question, right? Because this isn't about you proving or convincing or anything to anyone. This is about you understanding what their needs are and then offering a solution if it's the right solution. So if you find yourself getting in that sort of defensive proving energy, the easiest, fastest way out of it is just ask a question and you'll get back into that service energy. The other piece to remember is that in any sales engagement, and especially the higher the price point, the bigger an issue this is. That there's a logic element and there's an emotion element. And if you are not dealing with both elements, you are probably going to have a problem. Often we like to deal with the logical element because it seems like the easier thing to do. And what's so interesting about this, though, is we often convince ourselves that the emotional element isn't there, right? So what I sell, has nothing to do with emotion, let's say you would tell me. So I want to tell you a little story about a client that I worked with years and years ago now. But I worked with a client and we sold IP and DNS management software. So the software that runs the internet. And these were multi-million-dollar deals to telcos around the world. And the sales team would go out. And so we were a successful startup, but a startup nonetheless. Sales team would go out, try to sell the thing, come back in. And when they lost the sale, I would say, oh, what happened? And they would say, it's the same situation as we've run into before. And I would say, oh, right. What is that again? Well, our main competitor was Cisco. And literally it came down to one sentence. And that is that no one ever got fired for buying Cisco. And so what that means is that, apples to apples, our product was absolutely better. No question. No one ever questioned that. But we were asking them to disrupt a lot in order to choose it. And that was terrifying to people. People were worried about losing their job over that decision. And therefore, even though it was the right decision, they would refuse to make it. And so understanding that emotional component that's present in your sale, you're not just asking them for an investment in money, right? You're asking them for a bunch of different investments and commitments. What emotions are tied to those actions? What emotions are tied to those commitments for those people? And understanding that will help you to have open, honest, frank conversations about it. And it's like any elephant in the room, we need to address it. And if you don't address it, it will run the sale for you rather than you being in control. So always understand the emotion as well as you can. Ask good questions to find out and dig deeper if you need to. And don't pretend like it's not there, because if you pretend like it's not there, it's the thing that will essentially run the outcome of your sale. And the interesting emotion that is almost always present is fear. So understanding this is really important as well. Especially, again, the higher the price point, the bigger the investment, right? The bigger the commitment, the bigger the change that's required to implement, let's say in their organization, the bigger this is present, the role of fear. So people are really afraid. They're afraid of making the wrong choice. They're afraid of looking foolish. They're afraid of doing something that will actually make their lives harder rather than easier. This is a big one. Often we know that life's going to get easier if they do the thing we want them to do and if they buy our thing. But if they see that they actually have to do work to get there, it's hard to get them to make that decision. We have to really be able to get them to create that beautiful vision of the future in their head in order to motivate them through that fear. Because if they can't get through the fear, that action will never be there. And that's your job, is to walk them through that fear, to face it and to understand it and to get them to the other side. And that takes a lot of courage. Sales takes a lot of courage in the end. So just understanding that role as well. And it's likely there in most sales scenarios. The last piece is choice. And this one is something that you wouldn't think we would need to explicitly talk about, but we do. Because often I find that people are really good at everything in the sales process up until the choice part. And it's the choice part where things start to fall apart. So Estee Lauder had this rather brutal quote that I like: if you don't sell, it's not the product that's wrong, it's you. Well, that's kind of harsh, but it's absolutely true, right? And selling requires some specific elements. And one of those is a choice. So the truth of the matter is that when you start a sales journey with someone, it's like you say, you know, hey, Pauline, looks like you might be interested in what I can do for you. Would you like to, you know, explore this with me and see if it's a good fit? And Pauline would say, okay, great, awesome. What happens is that I know the path from where we are to where she wants to be. She doesn't know that path. And so we get in the car and we start to drive, and I'm driving. I know where we're going. Everything goes well. But if I don't stay in the driver's seat, if I don't stay in control of the sale, what happens is essentially middle of the trip, I stop the car, get out of the car, and I'm like, hey, Pauline, you want to drive? And she's like, sure, because that makes me feel like I'm more in control. So I would love to drive. I actually think that would make me feel better. She gets into the driver's seat, but there's a bit of a problem. She doesn't know where we're going. And so if you allow your prospects to dictate the sales process, you're not going to get where you want to go. It is your job to get that person through the process. And that requires being proactive. It requires being responsive. It requires, you know, following up with them consistently. It is not their job. It is your job to make sure that the next step happens in the sales process. And only you can do that. And so the last piece is there a question? Let me just put it to you this way. If you're having a conversation with someone and there isn't a question at the end of, you know, would you like to move forward to whatever the next step is? And I'm not saying like that you need to say, hey, do you want to buy my thing? The first thing, you know, the first minute that you meet someone, but whatever the next step in your sales process is, there should be a question at the end of each conversation that says, hey, you know, Georgia, do you want to move forward? Is it of interest to have coffee? Like, let's say we're networking. Would you like to have coffee? Other than that, if that question that can be answered yes or no, it's always a yes or no answer. It's very, very easy. Unless that question is there, if it's not there, guess what you're having? A lovely conversation, but you're not selling. Selling requires a clear question that there is an answer of yes or no to. So make sure that that is part of every step in your sales process. Okay. The last piece that I just wanted to know as well is around sales hiring. Because at this point, a lot of people are like, great, that was all fantastic. And I'm going to go and hire someone and get them to do the selling for me. And none of this is relevant to me. I'm just going to, you know, what's that thing in Monopoly where you like go past go? And you don't, you know, don't stop at go. I would highly recommend that none of you hire a salesperson until you have a reasonable amount of sales success under your belt yourselves. And the reason that is because you are going to be the sales leader in this company forever. That never changes, no matter how many people are underneath you. And if you don't know how to sell this thing well, no one else is going to be able to do it either. So you have to figure it out, and you have to figure it out the hard way by doing it. But when you do that, you will be such a better sales leader because you will know what is actually required to be successful. I already said this, but life is a series of sales situations. The other thing is you've been doing this your whole life. So just accept that you're a salesperson, and then you will have a lot easier a time with everything. We have actually, I think, quite a bit of time for Q&A, and I'm seeing some Q&As in the, or Q's, I'll do the A's, I guess, in the chat. Just wanted to let you know that you can connect with me on LinkedIn. So there's my LinkedIn. I'll just leave that up, I guess, while we do Q&A, and I'm happy to sort of open it up. And I don't know if you want to choose, Angie, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, I can read them out to you. Before some people leave, I think the breakout rooms actually was a good test trial, because we were actually going to try doing some breakout rooms at the end of this session. So just
great.
general networking. So if anyone wants to stay for that, we'll do some Q&A. We'll wrap up with Shannon and thank her. And then if anyone wants to stay for that, we'll just do some 10-minute kind of random breakout room happenings, just an experiment. But if you don't want to, you can just exit, after the Q&A. Okay, so in terms of questions, Kunal is asking what your thoughts are on the classic startup cold email of the whole, hey, I'd love your feedback on X that I'm working on. Do you have time this week? I think I got about 10 of them this morning.
Yeah. I feel ya. I don't see anything wrong with this, except that it's lacking some elements, in my opinion. So give me a reason why I would want to give you that information. No one owes you anything. Okay? Like tough love time. Nobody owes you feedback. So give me a reason why I would want to support your business in that way. There should be some alignment with what I care about in the world, let's say. So maybe you're a member of Social Venture Institute and so am I. And you say, hey, I just realized or you want to be a B Corp. You say, hey, Shannon, I noticed that Genesis is a B Corp and we're trying to be a B Corp as well. And we're doing this really cool thing in the world. And I'd love your feedback. Well, that might be enough of a hook to get me to give my time. That's your ask, is the time. So what am I getting in return? There must be some alignment there. There must be some exchange of value.
All right. Shapur is asking if you have some more examples on sales questions. Not sure if you know.
Well, that's a very, very broad question. I'll just talk about questions in general. Maybe I could do that. So there's no such thing as magic sales questions. So let me say that there isn't like the sales question that you can ask and everyone will just say yes. This requires you going back to that understanding of your ideal client and really, having a deep enough understanding of them that you're asking the right questions for them. Are you asking the questions that are going to help them to develop that vision of a better future in their mind? Are you asking them questions that will help them understand their challenge better than they did when they walked in the door? Those are the questions that you need to be focused on. There is no such thing as just a sales question.
All right. Matthew is asking kind of a more general theoretical question around, do you think this Canadian stereotype of being polite is a factor in Canadians having difficulty with sales?
I do. Maybe it's wrong of me to do, but I do think that. I also think that, I see a lot of similarities in threads of, women particularly tend to have different issues often with sales than men do. So we all bring our own little recipe of baggage to the sales scenario. And I think being Canadian is absolutely part of it. God forbid that we would ever impose ourselves on anyone else, right? That's huge. And that's what sales can be framed as very easily, especially when you're doing follow-up.
Okay, great. Okay, Scott's got a two-parter here. Suggestions on how to practice sales interactions before reaching out to customers. And 2, what is the best way to open cold calls?
Yeah. Okay. So number 1, practicing is such a great idea. And often we don't do it, right? We just throw ourselves off the deep end and hope that everything goes well. And what happens is we can create that sales spiral of doom because we're really not ready for the conversation. So Scott, I love that you have the intention of the practice. with practicing sales interactions, and with all of the sales teams that I work with, we do role plays on a regular basis. So it's not like it changes and you get it and that's it, right? We actually do role plays on probably a quarterly basis of what new items are coming in. A person plays a client, they put up new challenges, like those sorts of things. So this is such a good idea. And the best way to do it is to get someone who understands your business well enough to play the client. That's the thing, right? They need to have enough knowledge. And then the other recommendation that I have is get them to go medium hard on you. So you don't want them to be super easy, but you don't want it to be so hard that it just stops and you don't know what to do and you get all flustered, right? So ask them to go medium hard and make sure that they have enough industry knowledge that they can have a real conversation the way that you would with a client.
Great. Okay. Let's see what's next here. So Anthony's asking a question more around selling to investors. He feels like he's always selling to, he's always feels like he's selling, in quotes, the company when talking to investors. Do you have any advice on how to manage that?
Yeah, well, because it is. You're right to feel that way.
Yeah.
It's absolutely selling. It's a selling a different thing to different people, but the principles are absolutely the same. So a couple of things. One is to remember that it's a two-way street, that you're not there to just convince someone to give you money. This is about, a relationship. This is about what they can do for the company over the long term, and make sure you're doing as much due diligence as they are. And I think if you come in with that frame of mind, it gives a deeper level of confidence immediately as well, which can be very helpful, because that's the reality. They need you as much as you need them. So, let's call a spade a spade. And then the other piece is that, there's no difference to this. Make sure that you understand them. Do you understand what they're trying to achieve? And are you providing a solution to that? Literally, that's all you're doing. It's the exact same thing. You're just doing it with a company.
All right. So Georgia's asking about the importance of first impressions. How is it possible to make a good first impression for sales?
Yeah. That goes back to that slide that I had that talked about, come to the table, come from a place of service. If you approach every interaction from networking to closing with the only intention that I'm going to leave you better than I found you, you can't help but make an amazing first impression.
Okay, great. Okay, I think I've got one more here, just a little bit niche, but it's from Wanjiru. How do you feel about aligning your business model to solve some of the UN Sustainability Development Goals, and what impact would that have on sales?
Yes. So interestingly, at Genis, we actually do that. So we align a lot of our funds with UN Sustainability Development Goals. And I think that it's a fantastic framework for you to be able to communicate the impact that you're trying to make in the world. And impact is very sellable these days, right? I mean, it's so interesting, because the company that I work for, we've been doing this for 32 years. And no one cared for a long time. And now they really do, right? And so it's so exciting that people actually really care about this stuff. And I love that framework because it's very accessible. So I think by absolutely, that B Corp, how else can you show that you're living the impact that you're trying to have with this company?
All right. Okay. That, I think, is the last question. Anyone have a last question? You're welcome to unmute yourself as well and ask it in real life if you want. Otherwise, okay. Oh, wait, I think I missed one. Is there one more? Okay, last question. Any notes on going into sales meetings when you feel or are underprepared?
Try to avoid that.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of time blocking, block time prior, non-negotiable, and make it work. Because the thing about that is that, and I'll get to how to do that in a second, but let's talk about why it's important not to. You spend so much time and money and effort to get that meeting. Think about how much energy and resources go into getting that sales meeting. So give it your all, right? Because you put so much into getting that place that now you just need to take it over the finish line. So do everything you possibly can do. Like, I mean, I'm a bit biased, but I think, there's very little that's more important in a business than sales. So prioritize accordingly. But if you are feeling underprepared, ask great questions. Just keep asking questions. It really is, it solves a lot of sales woes, is just ask another question.
Listening as well,
Yeah,
shift
and
gears and
yeah,
listen. Yeah.
absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, well, we'll wrap the questions there. Thank you, Shannon, very much for sharing all that great content and for, in a world of virtualness, encouraging interaction. I think that's also really important. And in general, I find your approach really quite unique, but I think it's a bit of always that elephant in the room when we talk to early stage entrepreneurs, which is, you have to sell, but it's always like, there's always that, a lot of the mindset stuff you talked about is there. So I love that, you bring that forward and you just talk it through at the beginning. So I hope everyone appreciated that approach, and I think they did, because we got
Thank
lots of people here.
you. Awesome. And thanks to all of you for doing what you do. I actually feel like the people in this room, you are some of the people that are going to save this world in the end. So thank you for doing what you do, because if it weren't for brave souls like you, where would we get? I'm so appreciative. So that's why I love to do this every year, because whatever I can do to support what you're doing, I love to do it. So
Awesome. So thanks again, Shannon. Lots of thank yous coming in through the chat as well. For those who want to stay for some just casual networking to meet other people, we will create some random breakout rooms. If you don't want to stay, that's cool. You can exit now. We'll see you next week. In terms of, you are going to be thrust into a room with potential strangers. So I would just say, start with your name, start with your company description, and go from there. So we'll keep rooms open for 10 minutes. You do have the option of changing rooms if you want. So, you can leave a conversation and go to another. You'll have to go through the breakout room option and find it, but it's there. So we'll give it a go. And yeah, bye, Shannon. Thanks again. And we'll go from there. All right. So have a great day if we don't see you. Otherwise, we'll see you in a little bit, or you can exit from the breakout room as well. We'll have the rooms open for about 10 minutes.